Again, I'm Dr. Saulsbury. I'm a veterinarian. Practicing here in Sioux City. Graduated from Iowa State many years ago, 30 years ago. Go Cyclones again. Yeah, I'm really honored to be here talking with all of you. You're all experts in Iowa's ecosystems, habitats, flora and fauna, and we'll kind of circle back to why I titled this talk Lifelong Learning at the end. But you're all educators, and in veterinary medicine we're also educators too, to a certain degree. We try to educate about the human-animal bond and taking care of our pets and animals in our lives. But as a kid, why did I get excited about paleontology? Well, as a kid, I was really lucky to have two great educators. My mom, a retired teacher, and my dad, a physician. Our classroom as kids was nature. We went outside. We didn't have cell phones, we didn't have computers, we didn't have Xboxes. We made our own fun. And because of that, I got to experience a lot of things. My parents took us out to quarries back when you could go out to these quarries, and we looked for crinoids and blastoids and gastropods and trilobites, horned coral, sponges and things like that. And through these countless adventures as kids, we just grew to love being outside and love nature, and that's what you guys do for a living. You educate about what's out there in the environment. And so today I just want to kind of present a little bit about what I study, and that's paleo ecosystems or paleobiota, and we're going to take a look or a little travel into deep time called the Hell Creek Formation. Okay, the Hell Creek Formation existed at the time, the very end of the dinosaur era, and at the time of T-Rex and Triceratops. What makes up the Hell Creek Formation? Well, the Hell Creek Formation is a lot of mudstones, siltstones, clays. If you want to kind of vision what the Hell Creek looked like 67 million years ago, take Louisiana and turn it on its side. Okay, now let's see. There we go. And so you can see the borders. Okay, right there it is. To the east of that line was a great inland sea. And we actually have some of those exposures around here. It's called the Greenhorn Formation, about 90 million years old. To the west of that, that was dinosaur territory. What makes South Dakota and the Hell Creek Formation so fossiliferous is that this was a huge area of multiple rivers, deltas, basically saltwater, freshwater interfaces. In order to get fossilization, you have to have rapid accumulation of the bones by sediments, okay? And then multiple sequences of that over time. And so this is where we, again, find the end of an era, the end of the dinosaur community. And there it is today. Here we go. We have a lot of siltstones, mudstones. We have different layers there. We've got several of our group. This is out in western South Dakota. And we're just looking for fossil evidence of fossils and evidence of different, I guess, flora and fauna. So, and here's the paleobiota of the Hell Creek Formation. I think a lot of people, when they think about Hell Creek, it's just about dinosaurs. It was actually extremely diverse, extremely diverse. We had all kinds of plants. We had ferns, ginkgos, cycads. We also had sycamores. We had metasequoias. There were no grasses, very few flowering plants at that time. But we had tons of invertebrates. We find clams. That's interesting. We have amphibians, multiple species of frogs, salamanders, fish, freshwater sharks, rays, gars. We find numerous gar scales. They are a tough fish. Been around probably 200 million years. Obviously we have dinosaurs. We also have mammals. We have placentals. We had multituberculates, which are not present today. We have marsupials and monotremes. We have pterosaurs, flying reptiles, crocodilomorphs like Champsosaurus, turtles, multiple species of both aquatic and land turtles, squamata reptiles, and aristioderms. But we're going to go and look mostly for dinosaurs today. So here we are, and again, another typical day. We're looking at what is basically a Triceratops skeleton. It's right there. Okay, now it's working. So there's a Triceratops. and our group is working on uncover that. I was off looking at other things, and I found a couple of T-Rex teeth and a Dromaeosaurid tooth. So you can go ahead. We talked about the diversity of the Hell Creek. Here's a little tiny frog toe bone. Here's a mammal tooth. Okay, that's actually Alphodon. Basically, that was a marsupial. And then there's a little mollusk, a little clam. Those are much harder to find. As you can see, they're all in my hand there, and it takes a lot of work. Either we're doing sifting work, or we're just basically laying down and trying to pick them out with our eyes. But most of it's sifting through large amounts of matrix. We find turtles. Turtles are actually an interesting species or group of reptiles. If you find turtle shell in Hell Creek, you're going to find everything else, okay? Because turtles were aquatic, semi-aquatic creatures, so whenever I take a group out and we're looking for fossils, I tell them, if you find turtles or turtle shell, you're finding everything else, okay? So there's a little turtle. That's actually from the Oligocene. That's a little Stylemus. We've got a little one here we can show later, but turtles are important when we look for fossils. Okay. And we find stuff like this. We've got that tooth here. This is a Nanotyrannus dentary tooth. Always a lot of fun. I actually found one a few months ago. It's on the table here. It has not been prepped. It has not been cleaned or restored. And we can take a look at that later, but go ahead. Again, here we are. How do we find fossils? You look. You basically have to be, it's a lot of concentration because it's very subtle. Right there is the bone, okay? And this one's not so hard to miss. That's a turtle coming out of the ground. But you just do a lot of walking, a lot of looking. You have to be focused too. If you start dreaming about, you know, oh, I'm tired and I just want to go and have a hurt burger and a malt, you're going to probably not see much. So you really need to be focused and stay hydrated and things like that. Again, here's a Edmontosaurus fibula that was just barely sticking out. There's a ulna to an ancient mammal called an oreodont. Okay. There's bigger stuff out there. Here's part of a Triceratops skull, right there on the bottom, and then up. That's my dad and my uncle. They're cheap labor. They work for hamburgers and beer, so that's why we take them out there. And they're kind of fun to watch too, because it's kind of like a couple of comedians being out there. But anyway, go ahead. Here is a group of guys. We're also starting a nonprofit organization that's going to be tied with, actually tied with our retired military. We've got, this gentleman's a retired Green Beret, served our country. The guy up next to him is retired commander of nuclear submarines. And our nonprofit that we're developing is going to help to facilitate taking care of those veterans out there that have given so much back to this country. And we're going to be taking them out on special adventures like this. And you know, it means a lot to us. We're giving back to that community. Also, our nonprofit's going to be establishing scholarships, and we hope to endow that. And those scholarships are going to go towards young people who are interested in practicing earth sciences, whether it be geology, whether it be biology, animal ecology, ornithology. We just want to get kids back into nature. We're losing them at a rapid rate, and any way we can do it is how we're going to try to achieve that goal. Too many kids are trapped on Xbox and not really trapped in nature, and so anything we can do, we're going to do that. Yeah, go ahead. I think that's me. Digging up in Triceratops femur. What's interesting about that femur is we also find pathology, and pathology can tell us a lot about, you know, what was going on back 67 million years ago. Both ends of this Triceratops femur were actually, I think, chewed off. And because when I was excavating it, and it's not totally prepped out yet, but we're finding some marks that fit either Nanotyrannus or Dakota raptor, I should say, tooth marks. So here's our group here. There's Commander Stetler digging up a bone there. So we get to have fun. Obviously, necessity is the mother of invention. And so here we have a little invention going on. We found a fossil up here vertical wall. How do we get to it? Well, we just drove right up to it. We also use heavy equipment. This is one of our Triceratops sites where we found a large amount of Triceratops skull material, and we're just removing overburden with the cap there. And the ranchers like to do that, actually. They kind of like to come out and have fun. Okay, go ahead.
Is that OSHA approved?
Is that OSHA approved? We'll address that later.
I don't think OSHA can
Are
ask
these,
if you
are
don't
these
pay anybody.
private or public lands? Or?
Good question. All private lands, and then private deeded lands, I should say. And then we do have permits. We're actually the only nonprofit, non-institutionalized company to have access to school ground in South Dakota. So we have permits on school ground there that we renew every year. And just brief, school ground is owned by the state. The money that they collect from ranchers to use it for grazing, etc., goes back into the state's educational funds. And so if we do find things on school ground, then we contact those representatives, and then we work out where that fossil or how that fossil or fossils gets taken care of. So whether or not they will sell it, whether or not it goes into a federal repository, that's their decision, and we just try to work with them. So on that. My brother there, Triceratops humerus. What do we do when we find something? You can see he's dug a big hole. Okay, he's getting ready to plaster that. In the bottom there is a Monosaurus humerus, and you can see tin foil and burlap and glue, kind of the trade tools for what we do. And then that same humerus is right here at the top. It's in my prep lab, and I'm cleaning it, basically trying to stabilize it and clean it. And a lot of work goes into that. A lot of people don't understand that. When you look at a bone like this one here, which we'll see later, getting it out of the ground took me about 2 hours, but getting it prepared so I could bring it to you, so you can see it took me about 50 hours. So, okay. Here's another trike site, and we found some ribs, so we have them plastered and ready to go. They actually ended up at the Tate Museum in Wyoming, which is really cool. They're trying to build a full Triceratops skeleton, and so they needed ribs, and they needed some skull parts. We happen to have those, so we donated them to the Tate Museum, and they're very happy to have them. That's exciting. We like to help out whenever we can. Go ahead. Here's some Triceratops frill. This is probably going to go into another Triceratops project. We'll talk about that later. We're going to be trying to help build a complete Triceratops skeleton, and that's part of it. The frill is that large, massive amount of bone that's behind their head there. Okay.
You want to tell them about your plastering process?
Sure. Well, you can see here we're still digging. There's the rancher right there. He's always supervising and giving us a hard time. But he also brings cocktails or beer. So then here we are. We're done plastering, and again, that's kind of our group there on this trip. And we've got that squamosal or frill plastered, and now we have it flipped over, and we didn't break it. That's probably one of the scariest things we have to do is once we get it plastered, if we did our job right, when we flip it over, it's intact. That's not always easy to do. Some days we kind of go, oh my, that didn't work out. So, but thankfully we can fix those things.
How much did that weigh, do you think?
That's probably close to about 100 pounds with all the plaster on it and the bone and matrix. When it's fully prepped, it'll probably be about 60 pounds, 50, 60 pounds. One thing that I'm interested in the Hell Creek, a lot of times a lot of experts think that Triceratops made up a large amount of megafauna, herbivores in the Hell Creek, and they think that Triceratops, Torosaurus, and Leptoceratops et al. Made up about 60% of dinosaur flora. And in Monosauruses, Anototitans probably made up about 30%, 25%. I think that's actually skewed. I would reverse that. The reason they find so much Triceratops is look at that skull. Who would want to eat that? Okay? And all of you guys know what happens to a deer out in the woods, right? So with the Monosaurus, the same thing. It was pretty well, other than the horns and the skull, you could eat everything on a Monosaurus, okay? And T-Rex could. He could eat the skull in one bite. T-Rex could eat 100, 150 pounds in one bite. Grew about 5 to 10 pounds per day. Who eats the Triceratops skull? And we see a lot of skull material. When we find Triceratops, it's almost always skull stuff. So I think there's a lot of skewering. We work with a bone bed right now. We actually are now working on the largest Monosaurus bone bed in the world. It's one of the most famous quarries in the world. It's called the Ruth Mason Quarry. You may have heard it at some point in time. Already 10,000 individual bones have been removed, and we have probably another 20 or 30 or 40,000 left. Actually, I think Teresa, Dawn, maybe a few others might be joining me this summer to help pull some bones out. But free labor. Free labor, that's what I like.
How do we get signed up for that?
Well, you know, actually, that's something that we may have to talk about someday. So, yeah, because I think anything we can do to facilitate, you know, what we do as educators, right, is something that we should partner with. All right.
Summer IAN.
Pardon me?
Yeah.
I did not hear.
Summer IAN.
We can work this out. We can work this out. Like I said, I like cheap, free labor. So keep repeating that. And plus, I'm getting old, so my back isn't as good as it was 30 years ago. But you can see here, we've got another Triceratops skull right there, right there. That's still in the ground. That photo was taken just a few months ago. There's all kinds of bone around there. And that's going to be our spring project. We're actually going to be taking out a big crew in June. 4 of them are astronauts from NASA. One of them is named David Aldrin. His dad is Buzz Aldrin. So pretty neat company. And again, it's all part of our nonprofit. So you can go ahead and go on. Here's just you know, what we do when we find the bones. This is a Monosaurus tibia that's in my prep chamber. We use micro chisels, we use air abrasives to clean the bones, lots of glue. That's where a lot of art comes in. I like to think of myself as a little bit of a paleo artist. I'll show you kind of stuff that we try to rebuild. Here's a project that I'm building right now. I'm building a complete saber cat skeleton. This is about a 28 million year old saber cat. It's a juvenile Hoplophoneus. I've got a Denictus right here that I'm working on, but a lot of work, as I talked about. You know, once you find these things, it's your responsibility, it's your professional responsibility to take care of them and to treat them with the respect that they deserve and try to glean as much information out of them as we can. So that's the whole point. It's about education. It's about furthering our knowledge. Go ahead. Occasionally we do CT, fluoroscopy, and x-rays. We've got a Triceratops vertebra here. It's got a huge mass right here. I'll just point to it right there, yeah. But right there is the point of something, possibly a T-Rex tooth. So how do we're going to do a CT scan on this. Is just actually conventional x-ray at my clinic. And so I thought, well, let's x-ray it, see what we can find, because we can occasionally see things. So we'll probably CT that and see whether or not there's a T-Rex tooth in there for certain. That's fascinating, because that's behavior. Okay, because this is a healed thing. You know, Jack Horner said all T-Rexes were scavengers. Well, no, they weren't. They were active predators, and here's evidence. We have other evidence out there too, so Jack was wrong. Don't get me started on him. Anyway, we can go ahead and go to... here I am again. It's a little hot out. We found a Triceratops vertebra, and there it is when I'm done with it, right there. And again, that's probably 60 hours of work, okay? And hopefully that's going to go into a skeleton someday. Because as an individual piece, it's interesting. You put it into context with a skeleton, you educate. Here I am fixing, I've got that vertebra right here, and you can see I'm using aluminum rods and epoxy putty to replace the transverse process. Slowly filling in the void. You can see it on the bottom left there. I've got it back into position. So, and I kind of gave up working on it for a little while. I can only work on something for about 2 hours, and I have to do something else. I know preppers that they can just work on one project for weeks. I'm just not that person. So I got to get back in the lab on that one. So, okay. T-Rex, There's nothing sexier than Rexy. That's a big T-Rex femur that was at the Black Hills Institute. I tried to put it in my car, and they wouldn't let me. So, a lot of work goes in that. There's an interesting, this is actually another femur. It's an interesting dinosaur that doesn't get a lot of media because T-Rex and Triceratops kind of suck that air out. But this is a Denversaurus. It's a large ankylosaurid type dinosaur, basically walking tanks covered in armor, body armor. And we find a little bit of them. You'd think that we'd find a lot more because they're just basically all bone, but we just don't find much, and we don't know why. I do have this femur here, and they're just really a rare dinosaur. I always get excited when I find anything that's Denversaurus. So, okay. We find other species like Struthiomimus, a little toe bone there. Again, you guys were out yesterday, you know, hunting pheasants and working with falconry. Dinosaurs are just basically birds, okay? They're bird ancestors, okay? And so you guys are working on modern day dinosaurs, in my opinion. I just work on their ancestors. But, you know, you look at that toe bone, it's a classic Struthiomimus toe bone. Very athletic animals. These guys could probably run at the same speeds as probably a rhea or an ostrich or emu, something like that. We have a little Edmontosaurus mandible, right mandible there. Interesting that they have batteries. They were kind of the Cretaceous cow of the day. Large herds, probably migrated. Okay, what's interesting about Monosaurus is that, you know, they probably had hatching grounds or nesting grounds, but they are like elephants on the ecosystem. When you have a large number of elephants, they destroy everything. They knock down trees, they change that area, and then they have to move on. Monosaurus probably did the same thing. They ate their way through their habitat. It takes a lot of fuel to basically fuel a 6-ton, 5-ton animal, okay? So we probably have we actually think we have migrational rats kind of plotted out within Monosaurus, following that inland sea, going back and forth, north and south, okay? And that's probably how we get established bone beds, because they had to cross numerous rivers. And so in a sense, we're replicating what happens in the Masai Mara with wildebeest, only within Monosauruses. So they try to cross, some make it, some don't, some die, drowned, they float, they bloat, they settle in an oxbow. And that's what we have with the Ruth Mason quarry. We have a giant oxbow filled with tens of thousands of Monosaurus bones. And it's probably, again, a migrational event, because we're getting all sizes. We're getting tiny little juvenile Monosaurus mandibles. We're getting large adult Monosaurus mandibles and everything in between. So it's probably a post-hatch migration looking for more feeding grounds. Okay. Sometimes we find fossils in really bad places. That little hole right there houses a pelvis to a Triceratops. Each one of those steps you see is about 3 feet up. You can see a huge amount of overburden here. How do we get that Triceratops out of there? And we really want to. And the reason we want to get that Triceratops out is that we found 2 ungles or toe bones. We found the ilium, a femur, and a pubis. When you look at that mathematically, odds are within about 90% there's a skull in there. And it's probably in really good shape, okay? So we just need to take down that entire hill, all right? How do you do that safely? And oftentimes with people who aren't very experienced at digging, like we are, we've got 25 plus years in this, we're taking people out that are guests. They've never done this before, and we need to do it safely. So we have ways of doing that, okay? Here's a little video, and we like to have fun. Take that into consideration.
Ready? Yeah, ready.
That's called tannerite, and it's legal for us to use. And 50 pounds of tannerite brought down about 40 tons of rock. And we did it all, and the rancher had a blast doing it. He was having fun. He'd actually just broken his pelvis. He was out checking cows. His horse bucked, broke his pelvis. And so those crutches that just fell down were his. And we're like, you really want to do this? He's like, oh, hell yeah. You know, I'm bringing beer too. You know, and we couldn't stop him. The guy was just, you know. So that's part of the fun of it. And then, again, necessity breeds invention. And so we're trying to cave down this entire escarpment with tannerite, just to make it more safe. And then we'll probably blade down. We're going to run ropes over the other side, and we'll blade down, and we'll strand. We've got little chairs on ropes, and we're going to probably just dig it. It's good. This is probably a 1 or 2 year project. So, but it's worth it, because if we find anywhere near a complete skeleton, then that's pretty amazing. Along with all the other stuff that we have, if we can build that skeleton, we've got something that we can work with. So, okay. We like T-Rex. On that same trip, I was lucky enough to find a T-Rex vertebra. This is from the mid-tail. It's right here up front. I haven't done anything else to it other than just clean it up a little bit. About 7 years ago, we found a T-Rex skull. Okay, that skull is in a museum in Canada right now. That's the left dentary. And we found about 80% of the skull. And that's just me holding the dentary in my brother's office. I don't know why, but that's where I was.
I've got a question.
Yes?
I'm wondering, I'm just so amazed that, how do you know that's a T-Rex tail?
Well,
I'm imagining years of experience.
yeah, years of experience. You got to remember, I'm also a veterinarian, and I have lots and lots of experience with comparative anatomy. And I've done a physical exam on everything from a mouse to an elephant. And so when you have that, and I'm just so honored to be able to say that I've worked on hundreds of living species. And so when you do that, you have to understand your anatomy. You just have to. You know, if you're going to take the responsibility to take care of a rosy boa, you better understand snake anatomy. If you're going to take care of birds, you better understand bird anatomy. If you take care of fish, and so on and so on. So I've just had lots of I can bore you to death on comparative anatomy if you want to, but we better get a lot of beer and pizza. Maybe more beer. All right. This is basically my room. The stuff that is not going into museums goes down here. This is just what my wife did for me because she thought I needed a place to go and hide. And so this is just where a lot of the fossils go up. When I'm ready, a lot of these fossils, and a lot of them are already scheduled to go to different institutions. I have the only Spinosaurus quadrate that's known in existence. Okay. How did a guy in Iowa get a Moroccan quadrate, dinosaur quadrate? eBay. Nobody knew what the hell it was. So I bought a Spinosaurus quadrate for $70, $9 shipping. I went out and showed it to the Chicago Field Museum and the Black Hills Institute. Chicago Field Museum will get that. They casted it, and we've already got a signed agreement. They're going to get that when I'm ready to give it to them. So right now I enjoy just staring at it because it's a wonderful story. And it's interesting because I knew it was a quadrate because I'd spent 3 days studying T-Rex and Nanotyrannus with all the world's leading paleontologists. For 3 days we just stared at theropod bones and basically argued. And so this has happened in like 2005, and I just happened to be on eBay looking at fossils, and I'm like, wait, that's a theropod quadrate. And there you go, the rest is history. So and all these, for me, a lot of these fossils carry a lot of memories. That Monosaurus sacrum back there, I found with my brother. All these carry a lot of, whether I found with my father, found with my brothers, friends, or friends gave them to me. That right there is a Triceratops brow horn that I found with Dallas Evans, who was at that time the curator of the Children's Museum of Indianapolis, a really phenomenal dinosaur museum. And we were out hunting fossils with them and trying to add to their repository. And it was about 107 out. And we couldn't find my little brother, which is normal. And nobody wanted to go look for him. So Dallas and I did, and we actually found that walking to find my brother, and I asked him, do you want it? He goes, no, I'm not digging that up. And I was like, okay, should we dig it up? Yeah, you can dig it up. But anyway, it was just too hot, and he was done. He didn't want to do it, so anyway. It'll probably go back to the Children's Museum, or go into a skull. We'll incorporate that and make that into a skull somehow. Okay. In 2003, we were lucky enough to find a new species of dinosaur, Draco Rex, one of the words, yeah. It was really the turning point for us. It turned us from kind of a bunch of goofballs into really pretty serious guys. Draco Rex really illustrates a lot of, what we really don't know about paleontology in the Hell Creek. There's new species out there, and if we just keep looking, we're going to add to the diversity, whether it's dinosaurs, whether it's mammals, whether it's turtles, whatever that may be. Draco Rex now resides at the Children's Museum of Indianapolis. We donated it to the museum there. The huge part was children. It's the largest children's museum that we have in this country. Over 1 million children see Draco Rex every year. And what we're, again, trying to do is educate. We're trying to instill an interest in getting outside and being adventurous, okay? I think we're losing that a little bit. So we're really proud that Draco Rex lives there. So, Draco Rex is a Pachycephalosaurid, probably a plant eater. What's neat about Draco Rex, there's no dome. I can go on and on. That's my area of interest in the Hell Creek is Pachycephalosaurid dinosaurs. I guess their niche in that ecosystem. So.
That's all about the name.
Yeah, we all want to know about the name.
Draco Rex. Okay. Well, the truth behind the name is that Draco. We were giving a talk in Vermilion, and one of the boys looked at the skull, which I have right here, cast. They won't let me have the real thing anymore. And he said, "Wow, it looks like a dragon." And I said, "Yeah, it does." And he says, "You should name it Draco." And I'm like, "That's a pretty cool name." And we'll think about that. And so then we were also then given a talk in Indianapolis, and Victor Porter's daughter, Victoria, was there, and she goes, "Well, it's a dragon, but it's the king of dragons." And I said, "Well, yeah." And she goes, "You got to have Rex in the name." So we're like, "No, we're starting to kind of come together here." So 2 kids named Draco Rex, okay? Hogwartsia came from a paleontologist named Bob Bocker. I don't know if you're familiar with Bob Bocker. He's a fairly famous paleontologist, kind of a little bit of a lightning rod out in paleontology, but he's become a dear friend of ours. He was actually roommates in college with Stephen Jay Gould. You may be familiar with him as a pretty famous scientist. Bob's publicist knows J.K. Rowling's publicist. And so Bob said, "Well, why don't we talk to J.K. through channels and see what happens?" And sure enough, we sent an invitation to help us name this dinosaur. The invitation sat on her desk. She was going to ignore it. Her daughter read it and said, "Mom, are you nuts?" Her kids are more interested in dinosaurs than they are in Harry Potter. Yeah. They think Harry Potter's old news. They don't like it, They love dinosaurs. And so it was actually J.K. Rowling's kids that made her say yes to the request. And so hence Hogwartsia was our species name. So, yes?
So I like to go into the rabbit hole of YouTube occasionally when I'm bored.
Rabbit
but
hole.
I saw a YouTube video that suggested that this species, I believe it was a species, was a juvenile version of the
Jack Horner rears his ugly head.
I
I don't even know you and you're attacking me. We can talk about that. Levels of ontogeny. Okay,
I thought it
yeah.
was interesting that this had popped up.
You cannot cherry pick data. You have to embrace it all. Jack Horner cherry picked data, and he didn't look at all the other Pachycephalosaurids. He also didn't look at the stratigraphy. Okay, Stygimoloch, Pachycephalosaurus, Myogenesis, Draco Rex had different layers within the Hell Creek. They all existed, but that's 2 million years. They all existed in the Hell Creek, but did they exist at the same time? No. So Jack Horner is an example, in my opinion, is an example of cherry-picking data, publishing things, getting it out there, and then having to walk it back, which he has since done privately.
It seemed a little off in my opinion when I watched the video, but
How does bone disappear,
exactly.
regrow? Bone's expensive physiologically to make. Why would you want to mess with it? Okay? And again, look at the physiology, look at the data. This is actually, all the sutures are closed.
Yes.
Okay, we already know that. So the sutures are closed on this. Did you happen to get that by chance?
Yes, I did. Are you ready?
All right, here we go. Here's Draco Rex. This is Draco Rex seen for the first time by some of the most famous paleontologists in the world. Bob Bocker, Phil Curry, Eva, Peter Larson, Neil Larson, Dallas Evans. That's a kind of a who's who of paleontology in my opinion. So this is the first time. This video was taken as they saw Draco for the first time.
That's very important. That's a different species. It's a different genus from Pennsylvania.
This is brand new.
This is going to make a huge splash.
I realized right then that this was something exceptionally amazing.
It's pretty spectacular. This is a very old animal. Jugum postorbital co-ossified here.
You know, we're worshiping a new angle on sexual dimorphism in Pachycephalosaurid. It's the best you've got on a new species.
This is the most important Pachycephalosaurid skull found since the Troodon validus in 1922. That is extraordinary. No one's going to believe this. This is just amazing. No one would have believed me had I said I saw a Pachycephalosaurid from the lands with wide open temporal fenestra. It doesn't happen ever.
So whether it's a separate species or whether it's a female dwarf, either way it's important.
This is the part that is making everybody so excited.
Yeah, these fenestra right here are usually very small or gone in most Pachycephalosaurs, and there's a big dome right there, and this is no real indication of a large dome and these huge fenestra.
And absolutely no dome.
That's unreal.
Pretty amazing.
How lucky can you
How
be,
part of it works.
Steve, to get to work such neat stuff?
This is
It's almost to the point right now where you can see all of the features necessary to define new species, new genus, new subfamily. I mean, this is like the first Europeans who saw a kangaroo.
Holy moly. My goodness.
It's a new genus.
No question. Absolutely no question.
Dang, that's amazing. People will not believe this.
No.
People simply will not believe this.
And this is big news. This is big, big news.
This is totally unexpected, really. It's just.
Pretty cool.
Is that it then?
Yes.
All right, well, thank you. You know, I wanted to circle back again to lifelong learning. And again, as educators yourself and as a veterinarian who believes strongly in education and also tries to educate, you know, you guys are so lucky to be able to get outside and basically I consider the greatest classroom ever, and that's nature. We, as educators, have to strive to continue to not only educate ourselves so that we can pass on knowledge. Knowledge is useless if we don't pass it on. And through paleontology, that's what we try to do. You guys do it in your professions. And I think that's pretty amazing. And hopefully maybe someday, as you guys alluded to, maybe we can connect and combine our educational classroom with your educational classroom and mutually work together to become educated. So thank you again. If there's questions and comments, or there's no rotten fruit anymore. So, all right. Very good. Yeah. Yes.
So you mentioned that, you know, various bones and parts have gone to different places. How similar are skeletons that you can build them from different parts from obviously different animals?
They're pretty similar. I mean, you know, you have to obviously look at the same age ranges. You know, we don't really know too much on sexual dimorphism with like Triceratops, so we don't have to worry so much about that yet. But it's fairly similar. What you have to do is just find similar lengths of femurs, things like that. So when we're building like an Monosaurus skeleton, we have thousands of bones. So we have our list. We have 48 left femurs, 47 right femurs, 300 and 400 vertebra. Ribs are hard to come by that are intact, but we can piece those together with segments. So you just kind of go through the inventory and start piecing things together and try to composite a skeleton, because it's very rare that you get a full skeleton found. It's an exceptionally rare event. It just doesn't happen that much. With Draco Rex, we found a skull, 5 cervical vertebra, and a partial scapula. The scapula had bite marks on it. So, you know, most things decompose or get eaten. Again, fossilization is a really rare event. So that's how we composite. Like the Saber cat skeleton that I'm working on, probably about 50% of it's going to be that cat, Another 20% will be cats of similar bones, isolated bones we find here and there. And then the rest will be probably cast parts. So, yes.
So whenever you had that video of blowing up the side of that rock there,
Yes.
how do you manage not destroying your specimen using?
Well, we didn't tunnel too far in.
Okay.
That's number one. Since we kind of knew, we saw how dangerous it was, we tunneled in enough just to find out what we did. And then we covered it in tin foil. We covered it in plaster. And we protected it that way. We also put some dirt on it to kind of create a kind of a sluice, so to speak, so that everything kind of slooshed off of it. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, we tried that, and honestly, it worked out really well. When we went through all the, kind of the pile at the bottom, I found one segment of the ilium, about 2 or 3 inches square. And that was it. Everything else was intact, so. Yes?
So, piggybacking onto that, is there a point where you're doing your work and it's too far in there and it would compromise, you know, the area that it's in? Do you ever, like, you stop to consider
I
the
haven't
area?
given that any consideration yet. I'm not. I have time on my hands, and if I get a lot of free labor, we'll get it out. So, no, if we do it safely, that's the key. Time is time. Safety's paramount. That's not an insurmountable thing to do for us. So we can do it. It's going to take time, but primarily you have to do it safely. So we'll get there. You'd be amazed. Have me back in a year, and that hill will look different. It will look different, I can guarantee.